My guest today is Rob Greenlee, the current co-host of the New Media Show, which you can see live every single Saturday morning at 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern. Rob, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, it's great to be here, Jeffrey. It's always an honor to talk to you and speak to the educational market, around podcasting. I think it's an important genre in the space, and I appreciate you covering it.
Now, you have been podcasting for quite some time. You used to work with Podcast One, and you, for 7 years, were working with WebTalk Radio. How did you get into podcasting?
Well, it was really as simple as I just walked into a radio station. I was doing kind of like online marketing consulting back in 1997, 98, 99, and part of my consulting that I was doing around search engines was trying to share knowledge about what was happening, with how to market your website and your company online. And I just walked into a radio station, started doing a show called the WebTalk Guys that then turned into WebTalk Radio, which I did for about 6 or 7 years, and got that syndicated out to about 15 radio stations and got on the XM satellite radio network for a couple of years and built a really strong online kind of distribution and a variety of live streaming platforms as well as on-demand platforms, early podcasting platforms. This is actually before podcasting. And so when podcasting started in 2004, I just added the enclosure tag to my blog feed, and pow, I was a podcaster. So I started podcasting in September of 2004 and did that for a couple of years, and then kind of stopped doing the radio show and started to work full-time, working more behind the scenes, but I still continued to create content at all of the places that I worked at, from Microsoft to a startup company in Seattle that built a kind of like a mobile app back in 2005 to 2007 that had audio podcasts in it, and then left there to go to work for Microsoft and built the Zune podcasting platform, and was there for about 6 years, and just left about a year and a half ago to go to work for Podcast One as their CTO. And after a year there, I've left there, and now I'm working with Spreaker, as well as still a consultant to Podcast One as well. So I'm kind of splitting my duties between two platforms right now. But that's a brief history of me.
Well, we're so lucky to have you today to talk a little bit about, podcasting tips and tricks. We have a lot of people out there listening who are interested in getting into their podcast, but really don't know where to start. As somebody who's been podcasting and somebody who's been in radio, as the host of these platforms, what do you see as the difference? Did you prepare differently for a radio show versus maybe a podcast show? And I know you do your live show on Saturdays. Do you prepare any differently? Do you see a difference between being a podcast host and maybe a radio host?
Yeah, I think there's a huge difference, and it doesn't have to be that way, but it is that way because the culture of radio is quite different than the culture of podcasting, and it really is a culture question. It's about, podcasting has always been about personal engagement with an audience that's listening in their ear, very, very closely. It's not like they're sitting in a car, driving to work and passively listening and tuning in and out of stations, and it requires a different skill set. Radio is all about tune in, tune out, trying to put out these little tidbits of info that can keep you teased to keep you listening, or playing the latest track to keep your attention. Where podcasting already has your attention. You just have to be able to deliver to that audience an engaging, value-filled content that is engaging and entertaining and fun, and I think that's what radio is missing, and that's what audiences are craving and wanting, is hosts that are fun to listen to and enjoying, and they get value from and they learn from, and I think that's really the difference, and that's why radio and podcasting are a little bit like oil and water. They don't mix all the time. Some show hosts can straddle both worlds and do it, but it really gets back to talent and their ability to connect with an audience. And not all traditional broadcast folks have that skill.
It's funny how you were saying things that radio is missing. And I'm a subscriber of Sirius XM. I've been that way for 10 years at least. And I'm also a big fan of the work that's happening on Podcast One. I say all the time, I love the Chris Jericho show and the Steve Austin shows. And I listen to those wrestlers shows because those guys know how to work a microphone. But what I'm noticing is even the companies like Sirius XM, even the sports talk stations, they're getting into podcasting, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of those have kind of come in and out of podcasting over the 10 years that the medium has existed, and they've dabbled in it, and they've just repurposed the shows that they had on the air, and that doesn't always work. And one of the other challenges that the radio side has is that they're very local focused, and unfortunately, for good or bad, podcasting is not yet, and I say yet, a local medium. It is a national, global medium today, and that's another area where radio just doesn't match with podcasting, because there's typically not enough listeners to a particular program in a particular market to be able to support the production of that program if it's only targeted to a local market. Now that doesn't mean that will always exist, but I think for the next couple of years, podcasting is going to remain a national and global medium.
Are there ways that as a podcaster we can maybe regionalize our shows? I mean, I used to do a show that was geared for New Jersey educators, and I had a lot of businesses approach me for sponsorships, and they kept saying, well, is this show heard in my area? Because they wanted to know if their sponsorship dollars was going to bring them people into their pizza joint or into their library or something. And I kept having to explain, well, it's a podcast. People in Egypt can listen to this. It's not, yes, I'm talking about the New Jersey teacher, but really, like, what can a podcaster do out there who is looking to do that localized thing? I mean, let's just take it back into a principal who wants to create a podcast maybe for his school or his community. Clearly, once you put it on iTunes, everybody can hear it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that the future does hold local podcasts as being a successful model. I think it's coming. If you look at kind of the uber trends of what's happening on the web and the internet today, and even in apps and stuff, is there's this trend line toward more localization and more connection with helping people manage their lives in their local world around them, right? And what they do, and that trend line is going to come into podcasting too. And as it's the chicken or the egg thing. Does the content have to exist before people will use it in that way, or are people going to just kind of start thinking about this stuff in a different way and connecting with this medium because it's going to become part of, let's say, Spotify, it's going to be part of Pandora, and it's going to be part of all these streaming audio platforms today that are geared towards catering to people at a much larger level, and more, just a larger group of people. Because still today, podcasting is still, I think, it's at like maybe 60 to 70 million people have ever listened to a podcast, which is still, less than a third of the U.S. population. So if you look at radio is probably like 80 or 90% of the population. So there's basically still a gap in that listener base that can reach local markets, and I'm not sure how that's going to happen over time, but I think as on-demand audio gets more integrated into cars and gets better technology behind it to help people discover content that's relevant to them based on their desires and interests and what they're doing, and their devices know that it's going to be a better situation. So I think that there's a lot of upside to podcasting's future.
Well, I absolutely think that you're right about that. I mean, I even heard this yesterday on one of the Sirius XM programs I'm listening to. Cars are still coming out with CD players, but does anybody take a stack of CDs and put them in their car? And, we're dating ourselves a little bit here, but just about, I would say at this point, every car has some kind of either Bluetooth capability or they have that aux jack where you can plug your phone directly into it. So that is a major.
But that's really geeky, though. That's not a mainstream thing necessarily, and I think that's the challenge. I mean, until it's more integrated into the dash of the vehicle, I think not that many people are going to realize that they can take a wire or Bluetooth. It's a complicated thing to do in a car, though I think it's getting easier. And I think that's the key here, is that it is getting easier, and more of these car manufacturers are integrating these dash systems that are safe to use, that are easy to use, and that will be smart to remember what you like to listen to in the car, and will go there. And as you are seeing more of these platforms kind of move and develop, they're starting to think about traffic reports and weather reports and news updates that can maybe stop your program and deliver that to you, so it's more like a radio experience, but it's really your content, I think, is where the overall direction this is going to go.
Are you suggesting that in someday you're going to be buying a data plan for your car?
I think a lot of this is already on the roadmap at a lot of the big car manufacturers today, is that if they're going to add that capability to the vehicle, that they're going to bundle in there probably a free year or 2 years of data with the sale of a vehicle, just to get people to use the platforms that they're using. And then once they get them hooked, then people will just add it. I mean, it's just going to be part of their shared data plan that they have. And over time, those data plans are going to get bigger and bigger for the same amount of money. That's just the way things work. And I think it's getting better all the time.
Podcasting and classrooms are really becoming one these days. There are so many features out there on iPhones, iPads, iPod Touches that make video capturing easy, editing easy, recording audio easy. People are coming out with these Chrome extensions that they can record podcasts, both video and audio, from their Chromebooks. Let's take a look at what a classroom teacher needs to do, and maybe you can give us some advice here on podcasting. How do we do this stuff? Let's take a look at this from the equipment, maybe, and then maybe we can take a look at more of the software. If I was to ask you, Rob, what is one or maybe two of those microphones out there, inexpensive, something that a classroom teacher can use, what do you suggest?
Well, for one thing, you have to think about the environment that you're actually recording these things in as a primary kind of beginning point. I mean, if you're going to record these in echoey rooms or environments that are not conducive to sound, I would stay focused on getting dynamic microphones, and try and find rooms to record that have things on the walls and maybe carpet on the floor to kind of minimize the whole echo effect. But key is dynamic microphones, and it can be, I would stick with brand names that people are familiar with, Sennheiser, Shure, and get, I mean, there's pretty low cost mics that you can get for like $99 or less. But I think to do a quality audio recording, I don't think you really should go much lower than $99 for like a handheld microphone, kind of like what's behind me here. If you look up here, it's like a little mic. Here, let me pull it. So it's a lot like this, this type of mic. Just a handheld mic like this. It has an XLR jack on the back, and there's plenty of ones that you can get. I mean, actually, I bought this one from Radio Shack for like $69. But there's nothing wrong with using this kind of a mic, because it's excuse me, it's very directional, so your voice can speak to it, and it won't pick up a lot of noise. Sorry, I'm losing my voice. Around you. So I think it's good to use these kind of mics. Now, granted, this mic that I'm using here is a Shure. It's an SM7B, and it is also a dynamic mic that's very similar to this. What the difference is this has a very large diaphragm on it, and it's about $350.
Now,
But
you keep using the word dynamic mic. Can you describe or can you tell us what a dynamic mic is?
well, there's two different types of mics. There's condenser mics and there's dynamic mics, and these are the technology that's used in the microphone to capture audio. Most dynamic microphones don't require any power. But a condenser microphone, which are typically used in music recording studios that are all soundproofed, and because those condenser microphones will pick up every single sound in any room. I mean, it'll pick up all the peripheral sound around you, noise outside, or banging on the table or something. I mean, it'll pick up every little thing that happens. So I spent many years doing recordings of my radio show with cardioid condenser microphones, and I had to put sound bufferings on all my walls, else it would sound horrible. But the dynamic mics are very, they pick up sound from like a heart-shaped angle around the actual microphone, and they typically don't pick up much sound that's probably more than, let's say, 2 or 3 feet, away from the actual microphone. They may pick up a little bit of high frequency off in the distance, but it's going to be very, very minimal. And if you're in a noisy environment like a classroom, you can certainly speak directly into the microphone, and some of the kind of technology now will filter out a lot of extraneous background sounds. I'm not saying that the microphone will do that, but a lot of recording software can apply some filters, but mainly it's just your ability to speak and be heard when you're up close. Now you need to be probably inch to 2 inches from your microphone, and also have like maybe a foam buffer on there to minimize what's called popping, which comes from you saying like p p p p p, and it basically sprays air at the microphone, and it causes like a popping sound. So you need to kind of keep your distance from your mic as well, and especially a condenser mic, you really have to be careful with that. But a dynamic mic is much more forgiving as well in a lot of ways too.
So we have our microphone, recommending something that's dynamic, something that kids can really use in a classroom situation. Now, you had mentioned XLR, which generally means that your microphone has to go into some kind of a mixer. Are there any mixers out there, again, keeping in mind classroom budgets and stuff, something that you might want to recommend to a teacher, maybe 1 or 2 mics? I mean, I know with myself, I've got a Behringer here. I've got a few Behringer mixers here in front of me. What do you use, or what do you recommend?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Mackie Mixers.
Okay.
They have very, very quiet amps in them to amplify the audio, and that's exactly what I'm using here today. Is I'm using a Mackie Mixer, and I'll try and show it here as best I can, so you can see it off to right there.
Yep.
It's a 4-channel mixer. They make those for like. I think they're like $100, but they do make a 2-channel version that's I think like $70.
Okay.
And so, but that's not your only option. It just depends on what you're doing. I mean, that enables you to have multiple microphones and things like that, but you can get like a USB mic that will accomplish the same thing, that you can just plug directly into your computer. But that's typically for just recording, like maybe just one person talking into a microphone. But if you want to have like a discussion with another person, you have to have two mics. There are kind of lower cost kind of USB kind of mixers that you can get that are pretty compact and small. I have another one here. It's about $500, but it can take. It's very portable. It's about this big. It's about 3 or 4 inches in diameter, and it plugs into any XLR mic, and then plugs directly into a computer, and it manages those connections. It's a professional quality, but there are other boxes that you can get. I would just go to like an audio music supply site and check around on that type of stuff.
So what we're going to do here is all the stuff that Rob is talking about, we're going to make sure that we have some of the serial numbers, and we will make sure that we have it over here in our show notes over on educationalpodcasting.today. Now, Rob, a couple of weeks ago, we had Steve Stewart on from You Can Podcast Too, and he was telling us about Audacity and how on a Windows machine you can take your audio formats and use Audacity to edit your podcast and export your MP3. Would that be something that you're using as well, or are there other formats out there for people that are running Windows machines that you might be able to recommend?
I'm not a huge fan of the Audacity software, just from the standpoint of I don't believe that the quality of the encoding that you get out of the lame encoder that you have to plug into that is really all that great. So I typically use a software program called SoundForge, and it's just audio recording, and you can do some editing in there too. Software package. It sells for like $69, and it's a full featured. It has all of the encoding capabilities and the editing capabilities that you would need to do a show. And the quality of the encoding is a lot better in SoundForge. So it's called Sony SoundForge Audio Studio is what they call it, and it's about $69.
Nice. The one question that people keep coming up for, and the one question that we get the most, is about podcast distribution. Everybody knows that they need to get their show onto iTunes somewhere. But you had already mentioned a few things. I looked on your website, and you've got a link for Spreaker. What is Spreaker? What is that all about? And how does somebody get hooked up and put their show onto Spreaker?
Well, I think that what was really attractive to me about Spreaker was their view of giving a tool set to podcasters that is more complete. If you look at a lot of the platforms in the podcasting space today, they offer partial solutions, where Spreaker is really a kind of a 360-degree solution for many podcasters, and the key difference is that they offer live streaming, so you can actually record your podcast live and have it stream live, and have that stream actually turn into your podcast. So if you want to produce your show, in that way, and get your listeners to tune in while you're recording it, and then have that go out as a podcast, the back-end system basically allows you to do that and offers you kind of free recording software. Essentially, it doesn't have software that allows you to edit, so you would have to export that and do some post-production on it, but it does offer software for you to do all the recording, and it even has music and sound effects that are built into the live streaming software itself. So, which is quite different than any of the other podcasting hosting platforms. But it also has a robust kind of feed creation side too. So creating a traditional podcast that supports all the iTunes tags and has really affordable hosting of all your shows. So they have a free plan that you can get started with, and the other two plans that I would highly recommend for the educational market is the next step up plan, which is $4.99 a month, and it will give you basically 2 years of 1 hour 1 hour audio episodes that you can upload to the platform, plus also live streaming and automatic distribution to YouTube, SoundCloud, and a lot of other distribution platforms out there.
I do like that automatic distribution too. TeacherCast does have a account with Spreaker, and I love sending the RSS feed out there. And many people ask me how we did this, but It's Spreaker Radio is actually our gateway to getting onto iHeartRadio.
Yes, that's true as well. Yeah.
And you can find out more information about that over at Spreaker.com. That's Spreaker.com. Lots of great podcasts. I do like the live feature. They have a great mobile app. So certainly check that out. I believe the link is teachercast.net/Spreaker, and I'll certainly make sure that that's going to be over in the show notes for that. You know, Rob, for teachers that are out there trying to create their first podcast, whether it be by themselves or with their students, I got to ask you, like, what is the big advice that you give to people? If I'm out there looking to create my first show, I don't know what to do. I don't even, have an idea maybe for a show topic. Give me a couple things of advice that we can give to teachers out there.
Well, I think that the big thing is just think about what you're trying to accomplish, and what your goals are for the show, and I think that's probably pretty obvious. And really think about the format of it. I mean, a lot of podcasters will just get in front of a mic and start talking, but a lot of the more quality productions think about, well, what's the value, what's the topics, how structured should the show be, how much pre-show prep do we need, who's the host of it, is there going to be multiple hosts on this program, and that's going to drive what type of equipment that you need, and what type of platform that you need to actually distribute it. If you want to do it live, or you want to do it just on demand, pre-recorded, then that also creates a different situation for what type of equipment that you need. Are you going to have guests on that are going to call in via Skype? There's other challenges. If you're going to do that, then you need to get a plug-in for Skype that you can do two-sided recordings of those conversations. So it's really a matter of understanding what the format that you're trying to do, and what's the audience that you're trying to reach with this. And if it's just an educational thing for your students in your classroom, then you can do whatever you want to do. That the class and say their parents or that you're trying to reach with this, or you're trying to help the kids understand how to do this stuff. It just depends on what your goals are, and that will drive what you need in equipment and resources and format for the program.
Couldn't agree more. Absolutely. We like to ask this question on all of these different educational podcasting shows. Can you podcast for free? And it is possible.
Yes.
You don't need a microphone. You can record right into your iPad using the native voice recorder.
And it's actually very good. It's actually very good. Actually, the iPhone microphone is fantastic. I mean, we have guests on the New Media show that will Skype us through their iPhone or their iPad, and it looks as good as anything that's done on a high-quality webcam on a computer. So it's just a matter of getting into a Wi-Fi connection, and it can work fantastic, and you can do video stuff too. I mean, it's just amazing what you can do now. And then there's like platforms like Meerkat and others that are starting to come up now that is making this even more easy to do. That's a whole nother conversation about
Yes, and we will certainly get to that one day on this show here. Yeah. Coming up in a few weeks, we have a guest coming on to talk all about a great app called BossJock, and the fact that you can. I think BossJock is $9.99, but I did hear that there's going to be an educator version of that app coming out for a much discounted price. I will tell you, free, and to get your kids podcasting would be an amazing thing. I know for myself, at the end of our year, I do a course on the history of rock and roll. I split the kids up into groups. Each group takes a decade, and their job is to create a video podcast on that decade, talking about the news, the history, the sports, the music, the whatever. And then at the end, we put those up onto our website. Now, we don't necessarily need to go to iTunes. We just put our video up on Google Drive because I embed it. But at least it's a way for our kids to get into video creation, media, editing, sound, and they have a great time doing it. The audience for here is across teachers that want to create a show in their own studio like we are here, or that want to create stuff on their classrooms. And it is nice to hear from you, Rob, that you can spend maybe $100, maybe $150, get yourself a nice mixer, nice microphone, and really get into podcasting. Or, hey, if you have a kindergarten classroom, you don't need any of that stuff. You can do this for free. And the if all you want to do is to get media out to grandma and grandpa, very simple to do.
Yeah. No, it is. I mean, it's amazing the tablets and the computers now are getting really high quality recording capability built right into them, and I think very soon it's not going to be really all that necessary to have these really expensive microphones and things. I just think it's going to be built in. This quality is going to come even to telephone calls. Amazingly,
right.
You're going to be able to. There's talk now of a lot of the wireless carriers moving over to what they call HD audio for phone calls, and it's been a long time coming. I don't know about you, but trying to understand somebody on a phone call, on a cell phone call these days, is pretty bad.
Is that the same audio that radio stations are now doing it when they're dual banding their radio stations and calling it HD?
Well, it's very similar. It's a wireless technology that's going to come to their digital phone cellular signals. That's going to up the bandwidth. So as they ramp up their bandwidth capabilities, that the audio quality on these phone calls will hopefully improve, and that's the only way that they're going to save regular traditional phone calls is by upping the quality, because IP calls are starting to threaten that revenue engine that they have.
Rob, a lot of people are asking, how do I learn more about podcasting? Where can I find out some of the great things that you're doing? On Saturday morning, you and your partner Todd run a show called New Media Show. Tell us a little bit about that and what we can expect on a Saturday morning.
Well, it is a really kind of an insider show where we talk to kind of high-level leaders in the podcasting business and space. So we're typically talking about pretty advanced concepts around what's happening in the new media market, more specifically towards podcasting and on-demand audio is our focus, since both Todd and I are heavily involved in that side of things. But we will also talk about video and TV and what's happening in those spaces. But primarily we're a podcast show, and we talk about topics that are important to the podcaster community, and getting people on from companies and platforms that are up and coming that a lot of people maybe don't know about, and the people and persons and personalities that are behind those particular companies. Is doing a live show on a Saturday the same as doing a radio show that's live, or are we still talking different things for you? It's a lot less structured than what I did on my radio show every week, so it takes a lot less planning on my part, because I just book guests on that show, on the New Media Show, and they come in and we just talk just like we would if we met in a Starbucks, and you come in, you sit down, all the people at the table have backgrounds in the topic that we're talking about, and they live and breathe it every day, and so sitting around and talking about it shouldn't be hard, and that's what we do. It's not like the variety show that I did with my radio show, where I had to be very structured and know what my topics were and the news of the day and be very kind of accurate about it. This show is more about exposing what other people are doing and the trends that we're seeing on the ground in the real world every week. So anyway, that's at newmediashow.com. I'm glad that you put it that way, and you kept using the word conversation and talk. And I've said on the show a couple times, throughout the last 4 years of TeacherCast, I've probably done more than 500 shows, but I've never interviewed anybody. It's always been these conversations. And I also find that a lot of new podcasters are nervous about either coming on a show or being the host because they don't know what to ask somebody. And I usually just end up, starting off with, before the show starts, we have these little dialogues and just say, look, it's a conversation. It's a discussion. It's no different.
by the way, the camera's been rolling. Like you just have a good time with this, and those are the shows that I think people listen to. I mean, I think your audience knows when you're stiff, and I think your audience knows when you're nervous about things. And I always, the one advice, and maybe you can comment on this, but I always just say, have a natural conversation with somebody. Be genuinely interested in what's going on. I mean, I love learning new things. The TeacherCast podcast came out basically because I wanted to learn what you were doing with your iPad in your classroom. And so this natural dynamic of this conversation started happening. How do you approach guests, or how do you approach, either a topic that you're fully familiar with or brand new to you and you're reading off of show notes?
Well, I think that the bigger picture of what you're saying is that, I think people like genuine people, and people like to listen to genuine conversations, and that's what this is all about. And I think being very, very transparent and talking about things in a frank way, and not always shying away from controversial topics, or it's okay to put your opinions and your thoughts out there. I know if you're in the educational sector, you probably need to be a little bit more cautious on topics that you might talk about on your program. So I think you need to be aware of those kind of things. But it is about just having conversations that are relevant and genuine, and from your heart and from your experience. And I think that's the key to doing a really great show. And I think if you're communicating that to your students, and teachers need to understand that too, is that that's what this is all about. There is no one way to do any of this, really. I think it has to make sense to you, and it has to make sense to your students, and it has to be something that's a win-win for everybody. And if you can find that, then that magic sauce has been discovered.
I think that's a beautiful place to end it right there. No one right way of creating a podcast. Be genuine, and certainly enjoy yourself. Rob, thank you so much for spending time with us today. One more time, where can we find you online, and maybe how do we get a hold of you on your social networks?
I'm on Twitter at Rob Greenlee, and that's ROBGREENLEE, and I have a website at robgreenlee.com, and you can also go to Spreaker.com. Podcast1.com is another place where I work, and I'm on Facebook and Instagram and all those, under my name. So if you just do a search in Google, you can find me, and I can also be reached at rob@Spreaker.com, and that's SPREAKER.com. If you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to help or give some advice. So that's the easiest way to get a hold of me.
And we will certainly make sure we have all of those links in our show notes over at our website, educationalpodcasting.today. Rob, thanks so much.
Thank you.
National Podcast Day is September 30th. But what is National Podcast Day? It's pretty simple, and you can help spread the word. National Podcast Day is dedicated to promoting podcasting worldwide through public engagement. You may be asking, what can I do to get involved with National Podcast Day? It's easy. Head over to nationalpodcastday.com and check the suggestions. But ultimately, these options are endless. Remember, September 30th, nationalpodcastday.com, and let's start the conversation.